Hi, Yogi. How are you doing? Welcome to another episode of the Lights On podcast. I'm Cass. I'm your host. I'm a certified yoga teacher and healer, and I'm here to show you multiple ways that you have available for you to heal, to overcome trauma, to transcend, and reconnect to your true essence. Today, I'm joined by another guest. I'll tell you all about her in a moment. But I'm really enjoying this sort of broadening of the horizons in this podcast. I'm not sure how long you've been listening to it, but I started off very much just sharing about yoga philosophy because that's what I knew about and what I felt comfortable about. But as I've been evolving as well, and as I've been sort of walking down my own path, my own journey, it's really become clear to me that for us to be able to heal, we do need a lot of help and a lot of support. And often that goes beyond yoga. For me, yoga has been certainly a central part of my journey up until this point. It has certainly provided me with the comfort and the safe space I needed all these years. But I recognize that, sometimes it's a combination of multiple things. So I wanted to really bring guests that they themselves have embarked in their own healing journeys, and they have perhaps used other methods just beyond yoga. I still stand by the fact that yoga is an incredible comprehensive method of healing, of really understanding oneself and reconnecting to our truth and our real selves. But there's so much out there, so I want to talk about them and hopefully inspire you to also take charge of your mental health and see all there is out there for you to sort of try and feel better. So about today's guest, I am so excited to call her my friend. It's truly an honor, and I am so glad that social media brought us together. And it was so funny because actually I remember we followed each other, I would say, pretty earlier on in our respective social media journeys. I think I was still a pretty small account back then. I mean, I'm still a small account, but I've grown. So for me, I'm big, in terms of my own perspective. And I remember that I think we kind of just, we followed each other, but we didn't really interact much. And then a few months ago, something clicked. I think the universe worked its magic, and I think we popped up again on each other's feed, and the messages that we were both sharing were really resonating with each other. So we connected. We've met in person as well because thankfully we are both local to London, and it's been such a pleasure. I'm talking about Heema. I'll tell you a little bit more about her in a second, but I'm just so happy to be really to be embarking on this journey with her. It's really a pleasure. Heema is a researcher. She's also an educator, and she very much bridges a very important gap between science and spirituality, which is a gap that I also try to bridge myself. As somebody that grew up in a very logical, sort of reasoning and intellectual led house, I've always tried to back my healing journey, my spiritual journey with science. I think there's always a part of me that is looking for proof. And I know that Hema very much values and agrees with this, because it's about really bringing both of those worlds together. And when they connect, it's when real magic happens. So today, Hema and I are talking about the how you can heal and how you can improve your mental health through science, in this particular case neuroscience, and also spirituality. And it's super interesting because in the work that she does with her clients, it's really about supporting them, and not just with neuroscience and with therapies connected with science or the sort of typical medical route, but also to do with a number of spiritual practices like energy healing, like Reiki, and many other topics that she will touch on in a moment. So I'm super excited to be diving into this topic. I'm super excited for you to listen to this conversation. And so without any further ado, this is what Heema and I talked about. Hi, Heema. Welcome. It's so lovely to have you here, and I'm so excited for us to dive deep into this conversation. We're going to be connecting the world of spirituality with the world of science, or to be a little bit more precise, in neuroscience. And I know that we also wanted to talk a little bit about mental health and how sort of the two are connected in terms of really helping us improve our mental health. And I would say, obviously, our health overall, because everything is connected. And I'm so happy to have you. I'm so happy to tap into your knowledge, your wisdom. So before we get into the conversation, and we do have a few topics that we're going to get through, we're keeping this very informal as we normally do. So I wanted to ask you to introduce yourself. If you could tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, that would be great.
Amazing. Thanks very much for having me on this. I'm very, very excited for us to have this conversation around spirituality, neuroscience, and mental health. Just a little rundown of what I do. I'm a neuroscience consultant. I work with individuals and organizations, helping them with spreading awareness and informing the team and particularly leaders about mental health and neurodiversity. I've also got another leg of the business which has been running for over 6 years, where the focus has been purely on spiritual matters. And it's been people who are on their spiritual path, just how we can use neuroscience to help them move forward in their spiritual path. So there's two spurts of the business, so to speak.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you kind of like really mix the two worlds into one, because I feel like that's for somebody who's maybe been too into science, they don't really see the spiritual side of things. And sometimes we struggle as spiritual people to make sure that we're validated, just because it's not deemed to be as scientific as people think it is. So I think it's brilliant that we can hopefully clarify some questions and some concerns today, and really show you that are listening how these two worlds are so connected, and how we can integrate them really for a better life at the end of the day, which is what we all seek. I wanted to dive deep into the conversation by first learning a bit more about like your personal journey into it. So I know that obviously you are a spiritual person, or you obviously were in this sort of spiritual world. How has sort of spirituality and neuroscience helped you as Heema, navigate your own personal struggles and your own personal mental health? How's that journey been?
Okay, so I'm going to describe this as a bit of a story, just to help set the scene. So I just want you to imagine that your mind is a garden, and often it can be really flourishing and effervescent, whilst other times it's just a bit neglected and overgrown because life gets in the way, and that's what happens. So that's how essentially the concept of blending neuroscience and spirituality come together. Because my clients that were coming to me, their gardens essentially were overgrown and they didn't have a clue what to do with them. And they wanted to
first.
Yeah, exactly. What do we get rid of the weeds? Do we, cut the lawn? Yeah, exactly. Exactly where to start.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, anyone who has been out into a field or garden, what you want to see is a beautiful landscape that, allows for all nature to grow. And, you want the same things for your mind. You want resilience and you want peace in the same way that when you go to a garden, you want to feel those things, right?
Imagine like this beautiful Zen Japanese garden, like very.
Then the stories worked.
Yeah, that's what I'm picturing. It's not necessarily the state of my mind you. I think it's very different from a Zen garden, but that's what I'm picturing right now. Sorry, carry on.
No, exactly that, Kat. That's exactly the point of describing what our minds can be. How can they reach that Zen garden, as you said? That's the purpose, right? We are human beings, and it's impossible to be in that state of Zen 24/7. So the idea is once you can experience what it's like to be in this Zen garden, you can work towards it because you felt that. You felt in your body and you felt in that mind. You yourself just said, I'm imagining this Zen garden. And you are self-aware to know, okay, my mind isn't there right now, but I'm going to work towards getting that feeling, right? Whatever practice is used to do that. And that's such an important part of mental health is first having given yourself that chance to feel that zen,
Mm-hmm.
and then being able to work towards it. And that's essentially how this journey began. Like you said, my garden was completely all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't even sure I was calling it a garden.
Yeah.
And there's a lot. There's a
More like
lot
a
goes.
jungle. That's what I'm thinking about,
Yes,
like in my
perfect,
perspective of like
exactly.
this crazy jungle, no control. And it's funny that you say that, and we're kind of diving deep into like nature themes, but in yoga, the way that the ancient or our yoga masters used to describe the mind is if you think about like this monkey. Obviously, monkeys in themselves are already like pretty wild. And then imagine that the tail of this monkey has caught on fire. That is the normal state of our mind. So completely, alarms ringing in every direction, frazzled, frantic, in panic. That's the normal state of our mind. That is if we do not look after it. So I'm imagining this jungle and this monkey just running around crazy with a tail on fire. Sorry, carry on.
No, please stop apologizing, because I love that. And when you talk about monkeys, the monkey mind just comes to the forefront when you say it. It's exactly
Mhm.
how you say it, and that's essentially where our brains are at.
Yeah.
We have all suffered trauma. We've all,
Mhm.
gone through trials and tribulations in our life that we've thought, oh,
Yeah.
it's fine,
Oh,
and we get
sorry.
on
Can I
with it.
just stop
Yeah,
you there because I need to say, stop dismissing your trauma, people. It doesn't matter how big the event was or how small. This is something that I've been doing all my life, and I'm an expert at gaslighting myself and thinking that I don't have it as bad as anybody else, as everyone else. But what I experience and what you experience is valid. So yeah, that's it. Parenthesis done and said.
absolutely. No, it's so important to recognize that, the trauma that we do experience has to be
Mm,
worked through. And very much like you said, it's a really important part to acknowledge it first and say, I'm
mm,
worthy of working through it. And that's often very much, life gets in the way, your families, and you've got
mhm,
to pay the bills, etc. That you put it aside and you think, oh, I'll deal with it another day, I'll deal with it another day. And we know when it comes to the brain, that's not how it works. It will force you
mhm,
essentially to
mhm,
face up to what's happened in a not so nice way. So, like you said, the more we can be aware of the trauma that's happened to us, the more we can let go of it, and we can deprogram ourselves to
mhm,
make for a better person today. And when I say better person, I'm not saying that you're, a bad person already, but there is always room for growth. Our
mhm,
mind, that's where the term neuroplasticity comes from. It
mhm,
is there to grow. It's malleable. So whenever you hear somebody say, "Oh, you're too old to do that," you're not. Your brain
mhm,
can still grow and learn till the day you leave this plane, essentially. And that's the whole point of it. And that's where we talk about spirituality and neuroscience. When we go refer back to the jungle, that
mhm,
essentially our mind is at the beginning. And then we think about sunlight, and we think about water, keeping with the nature scheme,
mhm,
scheme that you're talking about. It gives us meaning. It gives us, it provides us fulfillment. When we wake up in the morning, we realize the bigger picture, that there is more to life than just what is facing us at the moment. So that's where things like, meditation, mindfulness, being part of some sort of community, even social media used in
mhm,
the right way can be a sense of community.
mhm. Absolutely.
You know, creators bear their vulnerable posts on there. They encourage other people to share their own truth, because you never know, somebody who's reading that might also resonate with what somebody's
Mhm,
writing. And so it's a sense of community to say, you know what, I'm not alone in this.
mhm,
And that's essentially what gives us that grounding to feel peace when we're feeling challenged, so to speak. And that's the touches of spirituality that come into it. And then, of course, we've got the brain science, essentially the soil, which we need to plant everything in your Zen garden.
mhm, mhm.
Kat, we're thinking your Zen
Yeah,
garden. That
beautiful.
needs to be the best. That needs to be optimal, essentially, to make sure that the plants that do grow through, they
Mhm,
do actually first come through in a way that serves the garden. So how does it respond to the environment, for example? that's where brain science comes into it. You know, we're only just touching the surface in terms of understanding brain science, but how does our brain, how does our body react to the environment around us? We have a lot more knowledge we do now than we did before. So in terms of mental health, it's just understanding how our brain works, raising awareness. How do we feel? And very, very much like you said earlier, don't discount what you're feeling. Don't brush off and say, oh, you know, somebody else in the world is going through worse. How many times have you heard somebody say that? Oh, no, you know, it's fine. My challenges, you know, they're trivial compared to whatever's going on in the world. You know, and you use the term gaslighting. You know, we talk about gaslighting from a mental health perspective from other people doing it, but very much like you said, we're very good at doing it to ourselves, always placing importance for other people, that their needs or their trauma or their tribulations are a lot more important than ours are. And you push your own needs aside. So that's, you know, essentially that's the fusion of spirituality and neuroscience, and why it's so important to make sure that our mind and soul are connected. And it's when those are disconnected that you find that mental health declines.
Yeah.
And mental health is one of those things that we think, oh, you know, I remember at the beginning when I was first starting out with neuroscience, a lot of my clients were like, oh, no, it's fine. My mental health's fine. You know, they didn't really relate it to, you know, it's a part of them. Everyone has mental health, whether it's up or whether it's down. Very, very different times of the day. And it's first recognizing that mental health is for you to take agency of and recognize, I can do something about it, right? We have so many practitioners out there. We're very blessed in this country and other developed countries to have access to mental health practitioners and all this science at our fingertips and freedom of speech. It's very easy to rely on these practitioners and not do the work ourselves and say, oh, it's fine, you know, I'll call the GP. I'll wait for my talk therapy session, you know, and that's 60 minutes per week. Or, you know, if you're getting psychedelic, that treatment to happen, you know, whatever it is that you're getting treatment for. It's not just about those 60 minutes that you're giving to that mental health practitioner. It's all the time in between of what you're going to do with what they gave you. So whether it's a cognitive behavioral therapy technique, whether it's a meditation technique that they've taught you, whatever it is, apply it. Apply the learnings.
It can only really help you as far as you want to help yourself. And I think that's an important point to make. And I see that as well, even as a yoga teacher. And very much using yoga as sometimes a form of therapy. I can only really help others as far as they want to help themselves. You know, I can be very much like always be on top of people saying, hello, come to class, you know, or reminding you there's a class today. But if you don't make it and if you don't practice, there's only so much I can do to help you release stress, you know, and it's very much the same thing. I think raising that awareness that at the end of the day, it's our responsibility. It's super, super important for sure.
Absolutely. And we all know the saying, you can't, you know, you can take the horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right?
Yeah. Exactly. I wanted to tap a bit more into your personal journey as well, because I know that more people will resonate with it. Tell us about like what you studied, because I feel like you've been sort of tapping into this more and more as you develop yourself as a person, as a human being. So I wanted to know like where you started, and this is going a bit off script, sorry. If I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm just so curious. So how has this all been shaping out for you? You know, where did you start, and how has the journey been in terms of, you know, diving deep into spirituality, then bringing in neuroscience, or maybe perhaps you started with a neuroscience and then you tapped into spirituality. So like chicken and egg, you know, which one came first for you?
Oh God, we don't have enough time for that chicken philosophy, do we?
Yeah.
I know, no, I hear you. So with spirituality came first, with the business and the concept. I've been a professional psychic medium for over 20 years now, and people would come to me for readings. We do channeled readings, and, you know, I'd enter trance mode and, you know, tap into whether it's their past lives, current lives, or future lives. I would connect to ancestors that had passed over, and pass on messages to them. We'd also do healing together as well. So that was essentially how the business began. But then clients started coming to me with mental health challenges, which I didn't know much about, only the ones I'd been through myself as a service user. But it wasn't objective enough to say, okay, this is what you can do. So I said, right, I might as well learn about the brain. It just made natural sense back then. So that's exactly what I did. I applied to King's College London, to their program. It was part-time, so it meant that I could work at the time as well, funding my course. So I studied. It took me 2.5 years to complete. It was psychology, neuroscience, and mental health. And I was still continuing the business, and it just made sense. You know, when you just find two concepts and they just belong together, it's like a marriage made in heaven, essentially. And as soon as I was learning, all these light bulbs are going in my head. I was like, but this is spirituality. This is what I've been, you know, my clients have been going through for years. And this is what neuroscience is telling us. You know, like I said, it's very new compared to the other sciences. And, you know, there's still so much untouched. So
it's
that's
like
essentially
every time I hear, every time like I read on like physics or like quantum physics, and I read a book or something on science and mental health, and you know, the connection of like gut health and how important the gut is, and I'm like, oh, for crying out loud, we have this, like this is what I've been talking about, people. Like, this is what is in Ayurveda, this is what we study in yoga when we talk about like the cleansing practices and making sure that you're purified, you know, from a physical perspective, whatever. Yeah, so I totally know what you mean. It's like, oh my god, it's all making sense.
Oh, I'm air pumping right now because that's exactly it. You get it. You know, we, with our spiritual backgrounds, we have been doing this, I believe, but not just this lifetime, but previous lifetimes. You know, we're relearning essentially all that we're practicing now. You know, you're relearning your yogic ways, exactly, memory, and I'm relearning everything from my spiritual ways. And then we're bringing everything into it, like you said. You know, quantum physics. You're reading all the new science behind it, and we're bringing them both together, which is such a special offering to everyone in the world, to bring in spirituality and science together. And so that's essentially how the concept was born. They organically happened, and it's all down to my clients. It was all down to my clients coming to me, and you know, I have a very varied demographic of clients. You know, I've got clients that are very spiritually based. And then I've got clients who are completely science-based and had never heard of spirituality in terms of psychic and premonitions and the clairvoyance, etc. And they genuinely felt like they were going crazy. But when they found what I was doing, I could reassure them that they genuinely are not, after a thorough assessment, obviously. Just to reinforce that sometimes that's what it feels like, because as you know, with yogic ways, it's the same with spirituality. There's no evidence. You'll just see things, you'll just feel things. It's, you know, there's energy there. Energy is not measured yet as the way we measure it from a spiritual term. When we talk about having a dream, a prophetic dream, when you're able to see something, is it just a dream, or is it, and then it does actually come to life? You get a bit freaked out if this keeps happening. You're like, am I causing this to happen? You know, is what's happening, what's going on with me? And, you know, when you think about schizophrenia and split personality disorders, there are so many clinicians who will obviously diagnose you to say X, Y, and Z. Bipolar is another very common one that comes up when you have premonitions, for example. They have to do their job.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you're tapping into it, because actually many of those things, and, you know, sadly or not sadly, I don't know, that's up to interpretation. But what you see, especially with like our Western medicine, it's that there are a lot of labels, right? There's a lot of labels, and not a lot of attention is placed on the experience people go through. You know, and they're very quick to come to a diagnosis and label you as, you know, bipolar or whatever it is that you are. And I think then they miss seeing, number one, the root, where is this all coming from? And number two, validate what the person is experiencing. So I think that work is really, really important, because you kind of say, it's fine. You're not crazy. There is other ways that you can seek support, if that makes sense. And I think that's really important, that you can use both worlds, right? And offer them, sort of offer a more holistic view, to those kinds of problems or to those kinds of struggles, which I think is really, really special.
Exactly. It's the holistic view, isn't it? It's first finding out what is going on, and the current research actually is showing us that in terms of all these labels that we have, which can help in terms of directing to certain resources, but it can make people define their lives through it, which means a really decreased quality of life, because they start to feel like they can't do certain things. For example, if you've been diagnosed as ADHD, you might automatically think, oh, well, I'm not very good at concentration, or I'm not very good at focusing, so I'm not going to do this job, or I'm not going to engage with this task. So the point is that it's really important to look holistically what's going on, because the current research is saying, as I digress, but going back to that, there are different spectrums of all, and I'm going to say disorders because that's a widely accepted term that everyone understands. Those disorders come with those own spectrums. Take into account, as a female, when you're, when it's different times of your cycle, whether it's, perimenopausal, whether it's menopausal, whether it's your period, whether you're pregnant, those will exacerbate the symptoms. And so, some may come up. Go on, sorry.
No, I think it's connected to that. When you say disorders, and I understand why you're using that term, because indeed that's the term that we hear and we use in the mainstream. But I was kind of going to challenge it, and instead of calling it disorders, calling it symptoms, because that's what it is. Those are usually symptoms of a much deeper issue of trauma that we have and that we haven't processed.
Absolutely.
That's
exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. Symptoms are a way for us to recognize that something is perhaps not working as it should. As we know, a classic one is anxiety. The symptoms that do come with it, for example, it could be disturbed sleep. It could be, sweating to the point that your bed sheets and your clothes are soaked through by the morning. And you've got the fan going, and it's winter and you're wearing, minimal clothing, and it doesn't matter about the fabric you're wearing. You sweat through them. Your mind is constantly racing. Those symptoms, if you have not felt them and you've been at a point in your life where you've felt some kind of relaxation, and then suddenly your mind is as soon as you wake up, your mind is worrying. As soon as you go to sleep, your mind is worrying. And all day long, your mind is just taken over by just constantly worrying and thinking. As an example, it's very different. Anxiety is very different for everyone. I'm just using it as a very common example. That that it's not serving you because it's interrupting your life. Because if you're not being able to function, then, which means not sleeping properly, which means when you wake up in the morning, you're not being able to function and have breakfast or get dressed in the morning or go to work. We say contributing to society because essentially that is what gives you that purpose. Wake up in the morning, going to work, whatever it is that you do for work, looking after your family, eating, sleeping, interacting with others. Those are the basic functions that we need to have as a human being. Now, if any of those are disrupted, as you said, when symptoms occur, then it's time to think, okay, what can I do about it as an individual? Essentially, as I said, we've got so many things at our fingertips. We've got IAPT, which is, up and down the country in the UK. It's easily referable through your GP or even online. You can have, if you've got access to private healthcare, there's also, you can go online to private counselling directories and get therapists specific to you. There's also, like I said, currently there's psychedelic assisted therapy clinics going on. Their trials for participants are available with mental health symptoms as well. So there is a lot, and we've got a lot of psychoeducational courses available online to help with that. But it is very much, again, Kat, like you said earlier, you can tell somebody about the time of the class, you can set it all up and conduct the space for them. But it is up to us to take that step and say, you know what, this isn't working for me right now. This is affecting me in a way that I know that I can live a better life, essentially.
I also wanted to to dive a little deeper into, because we've been talking about sort of like neuroscience and spirituality and these particular conditions. But I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the kinds of struggles that people come to you with, because I think those are important to, if you can give us just a few, 2 or 3 examples, because I think those are helpful for people to sort of connect with and resonate, just to really understand the kind of struggles that neuroscience and spirituality together can really make a difference.
Absolutely. One that comes to mind, I'm trying to think of the most useful examples that.
Yeah, I think one that has touched your heart recently. If you can give us a little bit of the story, obviously keeping everything confidential as you would, but whatever it is that you feel like you can share, I think that would be really helpful, just to make it a bit more real and personal, I think, for people listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay. There's one. It's to do with substance use disorder, and with this particular individual, they were struggling with. They were very aware that it was something that was causing issues in their life. For example, while they were drinking, they were actually driving, and then they had a family as well. And this is a very common example that comes up a lot, because a lot of the times it's the families that come and say, look, this person needs help. So it's more of an intervention, rather than sometimes the individual actually coming and saying, okay, Heema, I need help with this, because they don't always recognize that it's infiltrated the other parts of their family life. So this particular individual, we assessed what was going on, and we found out that from earlier on in their childhood, when we regressed back, there was a lot of being told what to do by other people. And so they grew up as people pleasers, when inside they were screaming because they had no way of telling others how they felt. They had no way of doing what they wanted, because they'd been bossed around by the people for so long. So once they'd recognized this programming, we then brought it to the present moment, that actually the substance dependency that they'd become so reliant on to function in was their way of coping. It'd become a coping mechanism, essentially. So that was how they would relax. And that's what they associated with relaxation. That was their time. That's what they could do. And it didn't matter about anyone else around them, because they essentially were helping them, supporting them, and doing everything that they wanted. And this is my little 2 minutes of heaven, essentially.
Yeah.
So what we did, this particular individual, we did some past life regression. So we went back into the past lives and looked at if there was any carrying through dependencies from there, because there's a lot of programming that tends to come up, especially with dependencies from past lives.
Interesting.
And that's something to really recognize. It's not often with this life, in the experience I've had with my clients dealing with dependencies. It can be love. If you've particularly been struggling with finding the right partner, that's another dependency that came up in past lives as well. Just finding the wrong partner, and going around and round and again. But going back, that particular client had also found in those lives they were doing the same thing. So this was not a behavior that's just happened in this life. So you think for lifetimes, this particular client had been repeating the same patterns and had managed to get away with it, because they didn't have a support network around them looking out for them. Whereas this time they did. In this life, their family really cared for them. They were doing it for their benefit, to make sure that that person is alive, essentially, and is not driving the car under the influence, for example. So that was the difference. And through the interventions and working with the family and that feeling of love, it's something that they had missed for lifetimes. And they'd replaced it with the dependencies as well. That made them feel good. It gave them a sense of belonging. And then when we started to work with the family and they started to feel a sense of love, but the real sense of love, not just through the temporary release through the substances, they started to not want those vices anymore, because they could feel the realness of what was happening versus the synthetic, which is what happens with substances. It's synthetic and it's very short term. whether it's cocaine or, whether it's cannabis, anything that's illegal or Class A substance that's taken recreationally, they give you a short-term high. And that's what they're designed to do. Now, on the other side, when you get that real sense of love, when we talked about nature earlier, you get a hug from your animal or, the dog or cat, whatever it is, that feeling inside you encompasses every cell of your being. And it's so fulfilling. So when they felt that love and they felt the genuine love, they didn't need those substances anymore. So they slowly came off them with the help of the GP, of course, as well. It's not something you just come off straight away.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole point of dependencies. Your body is physically dependent on them. It's not always psychological. You're physically dependent on them. Everything, your organs are functioning on these substances because they've been in your system for so long. So it's really important to make sure that if you are indulging in any kind of treatment, to make sure that you do have every single aspect and perspective in there. It's not enough to just say, right, I'm just going to stop everything. I'm talking about dependencies. I'm talking about medication. They are our bodies have become physically dependent on these things. So if you do want to stop them and you want to wean yourself off them, please do find support from a medical practitioner. Don't just do it by yourself, because you can end up feeling worse.
And I think that is also true for everything, actually, because and I think one of the reasons why I wanted to sort of go a little bit beyond yoga when it came to this podcast, and even like beyond as part of my journey, is that obviously I know that yoga is a very comprehensive method for of therapy of feeling better about yourself. But it's important that you do look for ways that support you holistically. And I do believe that yoga is a very complete method, but it can, for some people, is just not enough. So I think it's the same way that you find as well. Like, it's usually not just one thing; it's a mixture of things that help you recover and help you come back to yourself. So it's usually not just the one thing that you're doing, but rather the sum of all the parts, of all the therapies, of all the workshops, of everything that you are signing up for and that you're going through with.
Absolutely. I mean, if we look at ourselves in mirrors and we look at ourselves as a whole human being, it's not enough to just say, I'm just going to sleep and my life is going to get better. With that, you've got to eat. With that, like you said, go to the workshops, do your meditations, go for a walk in nature, do some, really deep breathing exercises. Even though we breathe to stay alive, we don't take any oxygen into our lungs until we sit down and, like you said, go to a yoga class and you say, right, we're going to do some pranayama. And then, I can't pronounce that word, so pranayama.
Yeah.
I know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
So when we do the breath work, essentially, suddenly your body's like, oh, this is what it feels like to be alive. And you suddenly feel relaxed again, and you realize what it's like to breathe again. And, and if you can get yourself into a position, even if it's once a week or once a month to start off with, just to sit down and do those guided meditations or come to the yoga classes.
Something for yourself.
Yeah. Yes. It's your own sense of escape.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be big. I think that's another important point as well today. It's sometimes we complicate it and we think it needs to be like this massive, complex treatment plan or whatever, and often it's the simple. Sometimes you do need that complex treatment plan because obviously the issue at hand is complicated. But sometimes, it's just about you finding time for yourself and recognizing that you do need support, and then seeking that support, and then actually turning it around is not as complicated as you thought. It's a process for sure, but sometimes it's not as complicated as we think it's going to be, especially as we dive deep into yoga, into spirituality, into other holistic therapies.
Right, it's just about breaking it down, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's about those baby steps, and you don't even have to see the whole ladder, but if you just see the step in front of you, then that's fine, and you're already showing up, you're already doing enough, you're already healing yourself and probably breaking trauma and breaking patterns that have been with you, as you said, for many, many lives, it's a big thing. It's a huge thing, actually.
It really is. So that was, that was kind of a snippet of one of the clients that, like you said, touched my heart, because they really put the work in. And I think that's really, really important when you're doing any of this, is it's down to the individual. And they really wanted to turn their lives around. And it was beautiful to see and be a part of. It really was.
It's such a beautiful and inspiring,
right. I mean,
yeah.
Exactly. I was very touched by their work. It's the inner work. It's their inner resilience, because it takes a lot to face up to what is going on in your life and confront that something is not working, and that, it's ego. None of us like to admit that we're not perfect, right? And that there's something wrong.
Yeah.
But to actually admit to it and do the work and be consistent, that is a whole different story. And this person did it. So it's truly inspiring that they managed it. And like I said, dependency is one that comes up quite a lot. Another one is focus. It's something that we all suffer with a lot, especially when stress comes in. The classic flight or fight, freeze or fawn, when our body releases cortisol and adrenaline, we struggle to focus. It, of course, disrupts all our cognitive functions. So it's the last thing our bodies wants. Our body's saying, right, you're in danger, essentially, when this happens. You need to either fight or flight, right?
It's so interesting, because and I say this quite a lot to my yoga beginners, and usually when people are sort of afraid, let's put it that way, of practicing yoga, they're very concerned about how flexible they are, and I can't reach my feet, and I can't bend back, or I have really poor wrists or whatever, and nobody ever mentions balance. And then I'm thinking to myself, sure, let's talk about flexibility, that won't be a problem, but I bet your balance will be.
It's very reflective, isn't it?
It is, because balance is about focus, and they don't realize just how poor their focus is and how much they lack focus. So then they go to the class and they experience the practice, and they're like, flexibility was fine. I mean, I'm not thinking that you're going to start doing contortions or anything, or certainly suddenly join a circus, because you're super flexible. And then what they struggle with is the balancing pose, and I'm like, of course it is. Of course it is. That's the real struggle. It's not the flexibility, because the flexibility is very physical and it's very, very easy to conquer. And it's just it happens naturally. You don't even have to worry about it. But balance is deeply, deeply connected with focus. And then we're talking about the mind, we're talking about cortisol, we're talking about the nervous system. It's a whole different ballgame. So it's just interesting that focus always comes up, because it does for me as well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, as you said, athletes, what do they say? Yes, they put the physical training in, but it's the mental attitude that you carry. It's not enough to just turn up to training every day and do the work. You have to put 110% in. And even when you feel like you've had enough, your body still has the margin to continue. But that's only if you let your brain take you there. Because it's very easy when you're out of breath and your body's aching, you're like, that's enough, I'm going to stop. That's enough, my body's saying to stop. No, it's not, because you still, I think it's about 6% still, your brain has that capacity to keep going. So if you can tap into that focus is yours. And very much like you said, and I know when I practice yoga myself, that if my brain is off focus, when you ask me in classes to do those positions, I'm off. Forget it. I just know, and I can focus on one area, I can do everything. But if my mind is erratic, it's impossible to balance. And so focus, especially when we think about leadership, comes up a lot, because I'm going to use the term leadership because we are all leaders. We're leaders of our life. Essentially, no one else knows our life better than us. We should be. I hope to think we're striving to get there, but we are all leaders of our life. And so I'm going to address you all as leaders. And it is something that comes up time and time again when I'm working with organizations, individuals, and particular people who are founders of running their household, whatever they're leading in their lives. Focus is something that they really, really struggle with, because stress, chronic stress it can be exhausting. So with this one particular client, they were very logical minded. Didn't believe in Reiki or spirituality or anything like that, which is fine. But we wanted to do some breath work with them and some Reiki, because as soon as I tapped into this client's energy, I could tell which areas needed work on. And I was very open with this client when we had the initial consultation. I said, look, this is what I do, and this is what I channeled into, with what was going on. And because of my connection with spirit, I could tell them further exactly and pinpoint what was going on. And they were very shocked at first. They were like, well, how do you know all this information? Because this isn't something that was online or anything like that. I said, well, this is what we do here. We connect with the subconscious, essentially using spirit to find out what is stopping you from focusing. What is that challenge? What is that hurdle right now? And that's what essentially spirit does. It helps us delve into the subconscious and pull out what needs to be pulled out to help you in that current moment, right?
Because that's the thing. It's also about getting to the root of the issues, because again, you can spend all your life dealing with symptoms. Like, you can do everything to sort out those symptoms. Guess what? They'll keep coming back because you haven't addressed the real issue.
Exactly.
And you won't be able to address the real issue. Well, you will if you are an enlightened being. But in that case, you wouldn't even experience symptoms. But if you are human, like we are, then you do need something else, and you do need spirituality, and and that's it. That's my opinion. There's no way for you to tap into what's really underneath your skin or in your subconscious without using some sort of spiritual practice, whether that's yoga, whether that's meditation, whether that's tarot, whether that's, I don't know, Reiki, whatever.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what, we think of Carl Jung, the psychologist. He was way beyond his years and peers when you think about what he was talking about when it came to intuition and consciousness. Essentially, we can use words, like tarot today without being burnt at the stake, essentially, in this life. In those times they couldn't, so it would be intuition, it would be subconscious, it would be consciousness, essentially. And Neil Seth is another great neuroscientist, if you're into consciousness, to follow. And for those who aren't aware of what Reiki is, it's a form of Japanese healing. And it was actually brought about by a Japanese doctor called Dr. Mikao Usui. So this is Usui Reiki that we're specifically talking about. And, he trained at Harvard University. So he was very logical and scientific. And
very sciencey.
Yes, very sciencey, exactly. I love that word, very sciencey. And he the story is that he went into the forest, and he's meditating, and this concept came to him about this energy healing. And that's how Reiki was born, essentially. There's so many other branches to Reiki. You've got Haruna, there's Fire Reiki, there's so many out there, and Angelic Reiki. It's just about which one resonates well with you. But we essentially used Reiki once the client had calmed down and, was a bit taken aback when I'd, given them these revelations and told them this is where the source of the stress is coming from right now. We worked together with Reiki. I first performed some remote Reiki healing on them just so they could feel the effects of it. And that's a wonderful thing. Doing virtual Reiki, you can be on the other side of the world. You will still feel the effects. That's the wonderful thing about energy. And we still don't yet know the mechanics of how it works, but we know it works. And Reiki's been used in hospitals to treat patients with cancer as well. And it helps get the biomarkers, in terms of stress. Their heart rates have been calmed down, blood pressure balanced as well. So again, going back to the word balance. This is what Reiki helps you do. It rebalances everything, rebalances all your chakras and realigns them all in the way that they should. Sometimes they're overactive, sometimes they're underactive, essentially. And so once we could use Reiki, we use it guided meditations as well to get to the root of the stress and what was caused to be off balance and off focus. We could bring them back. And this is so common. I mean, like you said yourself, Kat, focus, you have it with your students all the time. We've got completely different business models, yet both our clients are facing the same struggles. It's focus, it's lack of balance. not necessarily physical, but mentally,
Yeah.
right? And we're not talking like balance that, you're crazy, but balance that, okay, am I feeling calm today? That's the
Mm-hmm.
key. Am I in control of how I'm
Yeah.
feeling? Can I
Control.
get back the feeling that I want? Okay, so I might have woken up this morning feeling angry. I was angry because, for example, my partner was snoring all night. That's another common one that comes up with clients. My partner's snoring all night. I've tried earplugs, I've tried everything. You feel angry in the morning and you've
It's
got a
probably the
really early
partner that needs
start.
therapy,
Yeah,
not you. So wrong person here.
absolutely.
Send them.
Absolutely.
Send
Send
them
them
in.
exactly. Send them in for the
In
intervention.
in your case, in that scenario, you do know the source and you do know the root cause of your problem. So you can just go ahead and handle it by however means
Absolutely.
necessary, because that's one thing I have no tolerance for is snoring. Like, oh my lord, it's not happening near me.
I love
Thankfully,
that. I love it.
thankfully, my husband is not a snorer. So otherwise, I don't think where we would be. Probably living in like different rooms or different houses and like sleeping.
And you know what? That's a very common way of living now. That they've found that two people have found that they just operate better in their own different rooms, and then they
Yeah,
come together in the morning. And if it helps
if it helps.
minimize your stress, why
Exactly.
not?
I
Right?
mean, and if you're lucky enough to have a big house for that, I don't, but because I live in one bed, but in a one bed house. But if you do have the means for it, I say go for it. Like we all have different energy. It's lovely to be in our own energetic space and not have to share it with
Absolutely.
someone
No,
else.
no, you're absolutely right with that. And exactly. So that's one way of eliminating your stress is either changing rooms, changing your partners,
Yes.
getting them to treatment for their snoring and heavy breath work, essentially. But when you wake up in the morning, I was just going back to that example of that when you wake up in the morning feeling very angry and feeling very stressed because of that, and you've got a whole day of work ahead of you, and the kids are screaming at you saying, "Oh, mom or dad, I need this done," and you're just running on empty, essentially. You have two choices at that moment. You either give in to that anger and let it rule your whole emotional day, and you get stressed, take it out on your children, take it on yourself. It even dictates what kind of food you eat, to what kind of clothes you wear. It can dictate everything in your entire day. Get cranky at your boss, get cranky at your team, or you acknowledge that anger and say, okay, you know what?
I'm angry.
I'm angry. I'm angry, but that's not who I'm going to be right now, because I've also experienced a state of relaxation. And I'm going to decide to be relaxed right now. I'm going to take 3 deep breaths. I'm going to, stand. Another great one is just standing on one leg if you can while you're brushing your teeth. These are, or just looking in the mirror and smiling at yourself. These are not, very much like you said earlier, Kat, these are not huge things that take a lot of time. These are things that you make a conscious choice to do when you're in that moment of stress, to say, right, am I going to allow that anger and stress to dictate how my body and mind goes for the rest of the day? Or do I choose another path? So it really is a matter of choice.
It is, but I think it's also about almost taking a step back and realizing that we do have a choice, because I think many of us don't realize that we do have a choice because we are so wrapped up in that fight and flight that there's no choice. So there is a lot of work to be done in terms of, breath work. And, for me personally, it's where I find that yoga is most helpful, at least personally, or, whatever it is. It can be exercise or even going to the gym, for example. But it's just that point where you start understanding that you are more than your mind and you're more than the emotional state that you're in. And this is super powerful. I don't think we realize how powerful this is us realizing that we exist beyond those things. So once we do make that realization and we make that connection that actually we exist beyond these things that we're experiencing, then we start being able to control things. But gaining that control can be tricky. And I think, again, if you do feel like your life is perhaps not going the way that you want to, then do be brave and seek support, whether that's just normal sort of traditional therapy, let's call it that way, or an holistic practice of sorts.
Absolutely. But always good to recognize that the skills and resilience we already have in us, because each and every one of us has been through their own challenges, and we are here standing. We are here today to tell the tale, which means we've done this a million times in this lifetime already. And that's just this lifetime. You think about all the previous lifetimes as well, all of your resilience that you've built up over time. You've got those skills in you. It's just about relearning them and tapping into them again. And just, as you said, recognizing that we have a choice.
Exactly. And that's so important. And when we do realize that you have a choice, then I promise you, like, your life will change. Because then you'll start choosing. And maybe the first choice is really hard, but then it gets easier and easier and easier the more you decide to make those choices. Right. So I do have one last question for you, because I did want to ask you about how you help, but I feel like we kind of dove deep a bit into it when we mentioned your use cases at the end of the day, basically, and case studies that you have experienced. So I do want to ask you to give us just a quick sort of rundown of all the services that you offer. So that's one thing. So you can start there. But then I wanted to ask you if there is one last thing, anything else that you feel called to share with the collective today.
Oh my God, there's not enough time for that. What I want to share with the collective. So I'm going to start with the services.
Go for it.
Because I know those.
And I'll leave, by the way, if you are listening, I'll link Heema's profile to like Instagram and website as well, and everything that she needs me to link down below in the description of the episode. So please do go check it out.
Amazing. So I do offer Reiki. I offer tarot sessions and also geomancy sessions as well, where we tap into numbers. And
what is that? Tell me a little bit more about that. I don't know much about that one.
Absolutely. So it's again using divination. All the services that I use with the spiritual diving into the consciousness is another form of divination, but using numbers. And so it determines, using the formula, the outcome, essentially. So it's quite I suppose the most evidence-based, I would say, form of saying, okay, this is what's going to happen. I would probably compare it to perhaps I Ching in terms of using a form of science to create an outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It can be a simple one like, when am I going to buy that house, or, when am I going to get that promotion? And it can give you the month and the time. It's more specific than, say, visuals, all the capabilities of clairvoyance, etc., clairaudience. So yeah, that's another form. Yeah. So geomancy is great for that if you just want to be a bit more precise. So we've got geomancy, there's Reiki, there is tarot. I also work with organizations with their mental health in terms of neurodiversity, leadership, and inclusivity and growth. And also I do bespoke courses as well. So I'm currently working on a new one that fuses neuroscience, stress, and spirituality together, where we touch upon practices where we give practical examples of how to relieve that stress by yourself. So just providing you tools to build agency, because that's essentially what we want to try and do with mental health, is say, I'm going to give you the tools to do it yourself. So there's some of the courses that we're creating. I also do psychic development sessions as well. So there's the main service that I do. They're all available on the website. They're all there. But if there's anything that you think, oh, does Heema do that? Does she not? Just please do get in touch. Because things, for example, like psychic mediumship, I don't advertise, but it is something that I can do. But it also depends on when the person did pass over as well. So there's almost a limit, which is why the service isn't up there on the website. But please do get in touch with any of those services. And a message for the collective, whatever it is that you're dealing with today. I'm talking from a spiritual perspective, whether it's mental health. Know that you are not alone. Know that your spirit team and your spirit guardians are there. So whether it's a particular deity that you believe in, whether it's, your uncle that's passed over that you feel looks over you, call on them. We do not ask our spirit team for help enough. We almost have that human programming of, oh, I don't want to be too demanding. I don't want to ask them this today, ask them that yesterday. Actually, it's quite the opposite. They are there just for you, to help you fulfill whatever it is that you're hoping to do in this lifetime. They are there for you. It's brilliant because they're at your beck and call 24/7.
Right.
It's great.
I love them, especially when I'm worried about something. I'm like, okay, can you just handle this for me?
Exactly. Why carry the burden yourself? Why
Yeah.
not just say, you know what? I've got a whole band of army rooting for me who have better expertise and better connections than I do.
Mm-hmm.
Because they all talk in the spirit world. All our spirit teams talk.
Oh,
How
yeah.
do you think that we all
They
meet?
know everything. They know
Yeah, they know everything. The spirit teams are the one
really.
weaving everything together to make everything work and us meet, and we can help each other fulfill our purposes for this life. So, they're our networking team, essentially. So if you're good at networking in a human life, imagine what it's doing up there for the spirit team. So I would say, really make sure that you call on your spirit team for help, especially when you don't feel you've got friends or family that you can talk to about these things. Because a lot of the time when you're going through a spiritual journey and relearning your skills, it can be very lonely because you don't often find anyone else in your circle going through the same thing as you. And the way that it's designed is that every single person has their own corner of the world, so to speak. So when you're opening up and relearning your abilities again, you'll do them in a way that works for you. But unfortunately, most of the time, the people who come to me are the only ones in their family or friend circle experiencing this.
Mm-hmm.
So they're almost the first people in their line of ancestral lines to be going through this. So they don't have anyone around. So if you are feeling this, just know you are not alone. And again, it's something you can ask your spirit team and say, look, please help me find my soul family. And leave it to them, and you will find that people will just arrive in the most uncanny ways. They will just arrive in your life and you realize, oh, they're going through the same thing, and you can both confide in each other. And that's the key. So I think it's really, really important that no matter where you are in your journey in your life, know that you've got people around you that love you, not just in this plane, but in the spiritual plane as well.
Oh, I think that was a lovely message. Thank you for sharing. And I do feel like we forget that, there's a lot more in our favor than against us. It's just a matter of perspective sometimes, and us being able to shift that perspective. And even then, you can ask for help, not just of your spiritual team, but of us as well here in the physical realm. Let's call it that way. We would be more than happy to help. So if you have any questions about the work that Heema does or I do, please do reach out. We are very friendly, so we'll answer any of your questions with absolutely no judgment or taboos, which I think it's something that it's important, because as we start to delve, that it's just sort of talking about spirituality, then a number of eyebrows tend to raise, and so
Yes.
at least in both of us, and I know that I also speak for all the guests that I've had up until this point in the podcast, we're all very much safe spaces. So do reach out to us if you need anything. I will finish this conversation by saying, Heema, thank you so much. It was just so insightful, and I'm so glad that we were able to sort of dive deep into a few of your experiences, personal and with other people as well, and how we've talked about how really spirituality and neuroscience and mental health just go together. They fit together, and there's power in using both, and there's power in seeing ourselves, and as a consequence, our treatment plans, let's put it that way, have this holistic view as possible about them. So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for coming to this podcast, for joining me today, and I will say goodbye. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Kat. Have an amazing day.
Bye. A big thank you to Heema for this incredible conversation. I really hope that you have found it as insightful as I did. It was wonderful to hear about such personal stories and also such beautiful examples of resilience, of people really transcending themselves and really reconnecting and saving themselves, because this life that we live in, we don't want to just be surviving day to day. We want to make the most out of it, really. Life is so precious, and really our time here on earth is so short that it's important to make the most out of it, I think, or at least I try to. I even have a tattoo on my arm that says "I swear I lived." So, I guess that's a good reminder for me as well to, and I guess it just reminds me as well to not take things so seriously. I think that's why I got the tattoo in the first place. So anyway, thank you to Heema, to her generosity today in terms of everything that she shared. As I say, as a friend, it's so magical to be a part of each other's experience here, and I'm so glad that we connected. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as well. If you did, please let me know. Connect with me over on Instagram and TikTok. I'm at Yogaful Studio. Everything sort of together at TikTok, and then in Instagram I'm at yogaful.studio. Reach out to me by DM. I would love to know your thoughts. If you have any ideas, if you're a person that could also guest here because you are a healer, a light worker, you very much work to support others, feel better about themselves, supporting others, then reach out as well. I'd love to hear about what you do. And support to your work as well. Elevate, uplift your work and what you do as well. If you'd like to practice yoga with me or work with me, I have a number of courses available. More are coming. I have a yoga for beginners course if you've never tried yoga before. I'm also currently working on a course just for chakras, so to balance our energy centers, the 7 main ones we have in the body. And I'll leave all the information below, so check out my website, my membership. It's only £22, so that's less than £1 a day. And it's building and it's transforming. Even today I'm doing this huge brainstorm session in terms of how I want it to look like in the future, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, thank you so much as always for listening. Take care, and I'll see you for another episode very, very soon. Bye. Oh, and by the way, before I forget, everything that Heema has shared today as well, and everything, all the ways that you can connect with her are down below as well. So make sure that you do check the description of this episode. Okay, now it's actually bye. Take care.